Caracas. On the morning of September 20th, 2025, the Venezuelan capital awoke to the thunder of engines and the sight of armored steel rolling through its streets. The Altamira sector, an affluent district east of Caracas near the La Carlota air base, became the stage for a choreographed display of power as rows of army tanks paraded across wide boulevards. At the forefront of the spectacle stood Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez, perched atop the lead tank, waving to the press with a steady, deliberate confidence. The display was not a routine exercise. It came at a time of heightened tension between Venezuela and the United States, with both governments exchanging accusations over sovereignty, sanctions, and military maneuvers near disputed waters in the Caribbean. For Caracas, the parade was more than symbolism. It was a message. From early morning, the streets filled with the clattering rhythm of steel tracks. Residents who had gathered along sidewalks watched as the parade swept through the city. According to footage distributed by AFP TV, the tanks bore a large slogan painted in bold white: peace and victory. The images carried a dual meaning. On one hand, they projected military preparedness. On the other, they sought to frame the display as defensive, not aggressive, a commitment to sovereignty rather than conquest. By 00:22 in the footage, the tracking shots revealed Padrino Lopez standing tall, the first senior figure to appear in the parade. He raised his hand toward cameras and journalists positioned along the route. The gesture, both ceremonial and commanding, reinforced his central role as the architect of the day's demonstration. The defense minister's presence on the front line, rather than a reviewing stand, was deliberate theatre. For years, Padrino Lopez has been President Nicolas Maduro's most trusted military figure, a soldier who bridges Venezuela's armed forces with its socialist government. His words have often shaped the political tone of the country's standoff with Washington. On this day, his act of leading the armored column was a statement in itself. The tanks, painted with slogans of peace, rolled east to west through Caracas before eventually turning back toward Fuerte Tiuna, the sprawling military complex that doubles as the Defense Ministry's headquarters. The withdrawal was as organized as the advance, disciplined, choreographed, and steeped in symbolism. The parade was not an isolated act of military bravado. Across the country, Venezuelans have been attending workshops where civilians are trained in basic weapon handling. These initiatives, directed by the Bolivarian militia and the National Guard, are part of what the government calls a program of integral defense of the homeland. Critics, however, warn that the line between national defense and mass militarization is becoming blurred. Community leaders in Caracas neighborhoods have confirmed that residents are being encouraged to attend weapons workshops. Images circulated in Venezuelan state media show groups of men and women, many in casual clothing, not military uniforms, holding rifles under the guidance of National Guard instructors. Officials describe the sessions as precautionary in case of foreign aggression, while human rights organizations have expressed alarm at the risks of militarizing society. The display unfolded against a backdrop of strained relations with Washington. US officials have accused Venezuela of harboring armed groups along its borders and of challenging maritime boundaries in the Caribbean. Caracas, for its part, insists that it is defending its sovereignty against American interference and economic sanctions. In the weeks leading up to the parade, Venezuela had staged live-fire naval drills in disputed waters near Guyana, escalating fears of a broader regional confrontation. Analysts note that such displays, tanks in the streets, drills at sea, and workshops for civilians, are designed not just for external audiences, but for domestic reassurance. They project strength to supporters and deterrence to opponents. Venezuela's reliance on military symbolism has deep roots. Since the Bolivarian Revolution, launched by Hugo Chavez more than 2 decades ago, the armed forces have become central to national identity. Chavez, himself a former military officer, fused socialist rhetoric with martial imagery, presenting the army as the guardian of independence and revolution. Padrino Lopez, inheriting that mantle under Maduro, now embodies this dual role: strategist and showman, soldier and political figure. His parade through Caracas echoed Chavez's old traditions, where tanks and soldiers marched not only on Independence Day, but during moments of political tension. Perhaps the most striking feature of the parade was the repeated appearance of the slogan, "Peace and Victory," emblazoned on the armoured vehicles. At close-up range, as seen between 0043 and 0055 in the footage, the words stood out against the olive green steel. The juxtaposition was deliberate, a show of force presented as a call for peace. Critics argue that such slogans mask the reality of a government tightening its grip on society. Supporters counter that Venezuela has the right to defend itself against foreign pressure. For many ordinary citizens, the sight of tanks rumbling through Caracas evoked mixed emotions, pride for some, unease for others. By 1:01 in the footage, the tanks began their return toward Fuerte Tiuna. Wide shots showed the long line of armoured vehicles slowly pulling back into the vast complex that houses both military offices and barracks. The withdrawal reinforced the sense that the parade was not a spontaneous march, but a carefully staged demonstration designed to begin and end within the symbolic core of Venezuela's defense establishment. Fuerte Tiuna itself has historic significance. It was there, in April 2002, that Chavez briefly lost power during a failed coup attempt, and where he was restored to command within 48 hours. The site continues to embody resilience and control for Venezuela's political military leadership. For the Venezuelan government, the primary audience for the parade was likely domestic. In a country racked by economic collapse, hyperinflation, and mass emigration, demonstrations of unity and strength are meant to rally support. The sight of Padrino Lopez atop a tank sent a signal. The armed forces remain loyal to the government, and the government remains unshaken by external threats. In recent years, civilian-military integration has become a recurring theme in Maduro's discourse. He has repeatedly called on citizens to prepare for defense, framing the nation as under siege. In that sense, the parade was not only about tanks in the streets, but about affirming a narrative of resistance. International observers viewed the parade with skepticism. Washington dismissed the spectacle as propaganda, while regional neighbors watched with unease. Colombia and Guyana, both of which have tense territorial disputes with Venezuela, expressed concern about the militarization of Caracas's politics. The European Union, meanwhile, reiterated its call for dialogue and restraint, urging Venezuela to focus on internal reconciliation rather than external confrontation. Yet for Maduro and Padrino Lopez, such criticism only reinforces their narrative, that Venezuela is besieged by powerful outsiders and that unity at home is the only path to survival. The role of international media cannot be ignored. AFP TV's distribution of the parade footage ensured that the event was not confined to Venezuelan state media. By appearing in the feeds of global broadcasters, the images reached an audience far beyond Caracas. The sight of tanks with slogans of peace, of a defense minister leading from the front, became part of the international conversation about Venezuela's trajectory. In a media landscape where visuals often outweigh words, the parade succeeded in broadcasting its message worldwide, even as interpretations differed sharply. The September 20th parade through Caracas was more than just a military drill. It was a stage-managed event designed to project resilience at a moment of heightened geopolitical tension. The tanks, the slogans, the defense minister waving from atop armoured steel, all were part of a narrative crafted for domestic reassurance and international messaging. As the vehicles rolled back into Fuerte Tiuna and the city streets returned to ordinary traffic, the questions remained. Was this a demonstration of legitimate defense or an exercise in militarized propaganda? For Venezuelans, the answers may depend less on the roar of engines and more on the struggles of daily life, inflation, shortages, and migration that no parade can resolve. Yet the image lingers, tanks bearing the words peace and victory crossing the heart of Caracas, a defense minister leading the way, and a government determined to show that, despite its challenges, it still commands the streets.